Hello and welcome to the second ever episode of the StoryMode podcast. Some of you might be wondering, where is our third host? Well, Mike unfortunately seems to have woken up with a deathly illness that has caused him to fall into the depths of despair, and he's unfortunately unable to join us today. Welcome to everybody who's tuning in to the live stream, but you might also be listening to this on the recording or perhaps even the YouTube version. Today we will be discussing a game called Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, which honestly I adore. And I'm joined with Lewis. How you doing, man?
Hello. I'm doing pretty well.
Come on, you can do better than that. Come on, just say something about yourself. Just maybe even what you ate for breakfast. Just give us a little taste of who you are. Hi, Lewis.
Hi. I don't know. I feel like I'm a very unextraordinary person, but apparently I'm extraordinary enough to be in this podcast. But
Your family here, dude. You can do better than this. Anyways, so we're going to be talking about Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, as I already mentioned. We're going to ramble for about an hour, I think, assuming we can go that long. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk about is the purpose of this podcast. We have both completed the game Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. I played it last about 2 months ago, unfortunately. I didn't get a chance to replay it. But I have reread the story, and I watched an entire Let's Play while at work because I'm a crazy person. And we're going to sit here and we're going to discuss our thoughts. So, if you are spoiler sensitive, I recommend you close this podcast now and wait for the audio version. Or, if you're listening to the audio version, pause it, go buy the game, and play it. Then come back. Now that we have that aside, welcome to the Story Mode podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Blind, co-hosted by Lewis, who's over there. So, for starters, the story begins with a boy named Naidi. I can never pronounce his name correctly. And he's basically saying goodbye to his mother. When he walks into the town and later, quite quickly, realizes that his father is very ill. His brother comes and gets him, his older brother. Now, these two brothers set out on a quest to go find the water from the Tree of Life to come back and restore their father back to his health. Whatever he's dying from. He's dying from some mysterious illness. And I'm going to let Lewis talk about the mechanics of the game because they're quite interesting.
The mechanics, so it's kind of interesting because you control both brothers at the same time. So, in a standard platformer, you move one analog stick to move around. Well, in this one, you take two analog sticks to move two characters around.
It's quite literally a cooperative single-player game.
Yeah.
If you will. And what actually kind of intrigues me is apparently it's on iOS now, so I guess you're like, I don't know, that's just weird. It weirds me out when I think about it. But
who knows?
It's like point and click. But anyways, you take your controller and one brother is on each analog stick, and one brother is on each trigger. I don't actually know why we're describing this, but it ties in very heavily to the game because as the story progresses and as we get through the acts, they make their way through the town, and slowly you start to encounter little bits of dread, like you witness a person committing suicide very early on in the game, which is quite shocking, considering the game has such a whimsical feel to it. I'm trying to pass this off to you, Lewis. You gotta
we
support
didn't
me
script
here, man.
this.
Of course we didn't. You're killing me here, man.
Yeah.
So anyways, you make your way through the town, you get out of the town. And then eventually you find your way, you journey through the village into the hills and the mountains. I'm literally just reading off of Wikipedia now. You journey through the village through the hills and the mountains while facing challenges. And the local bully, a farmer's aggressive dog, and deadly wolves. That's your first major event in the game is when you encounter the wolves. You work your way past the
I
wolves.
wouldn't say so. The chapter before that was pretty major.
Okay, well, start talking.
Um,
I was gonna say the wolves were the first real scary part of the game for me.
well, before that, you have 2 fights with 2 different ogres. Those were pretty terrifying.
Well, I don't know. Okay,
The latter of the 2.
I kind of skipped that part, I guess. So the first character that you encounter in the game is a troll. Now, this troll seems kind of sad, and he looks kind of threatening initially. You walk up to him, and he looks at you like, oh god, this thing's gonna murder me, but he just kind of walks up to you and kind of, like, picks you up. It's quite adorable. And then what's the purpose of the troll? Like, what happens with the troll?
He basically helps you along for a significant ways. So there's about 5 minutes where you have to wait on the ogre to be able to, like, bridge larger gaps and get up to higher places and stuff. And then eventually he takes you into this giant mine where, I don't know, a ton of these trolls are. And they're mining something indescript. And they've captured the troll's girlfriend or wife or something. You have to rescue her.
Essentially, like, the troll helps you along your way a little bit, but obviously you're helping him as well. Which is quite interesting because in the early part of this game, they're just showing you this whimsical world, this beautiful whimsical world, and they're getting you very attached to these characters. And honestly, for a game that has absolutely no English dialogue because the characters spend the entire time speaking in, like, random gibberish for the most part, it's actually quite amazing how attached you get to these characters because you're fumbling with this goddamn controller and trying to get them to go in the same direction, and somehow they always end up flipping, and then you're, like, basically working with mirrored controls. It's very difficult to describe, really.
It's very weird. I mean, I will say that, like, I think when I first played it, I had actually looked for language settings.
Really?
I wanted to make sure I didn't have it set to Swedish or something.
I know I had that moment with Magica, but that game, they are speaking in Swedish, but it's Swedish gibberish, so... yeah, no, that's actually quite interesting, because I just kind of assumed that they weren't meant to be speaking English because, like, they're basically just saying nah the entire time. Like, they...
Well, there's a lot of very English sounding stuff. Like, if you get too far away, they basically just say, hey, other brother name.
Well,
I mean it's
mostly just I not really a hey. But anyways,
there's a little bit of stuff. Like, when the guy actually sends you on the quest and hands you the map, he fairly clearly says the word water and a couple of things like that.
Really?
There's a few words you can pick out.
I did not pick up on that at all. Huh.
Which is why I thought maybe it was another language, because a lot of those European languages would share words and have similar sounding words, and it's like, it sounded like it could have been a real European language.
Okay. Huh. That's interesting. Like, I didn't pick up on the English words at all. Maybe I was just like, huh. Well, anyways, once you encounter the troll couple that kind of help you along your way for the beginning portion of this game, you kind of get to a point where you're like at like the entrance of this cave, and the troll kind of throws you into the cave. You go down to the cave, you work your way through this dungeon thing. It's really intricate and interesting and almost borderline steampunky. And then eventually
borderline?
Okay, it is pretty steampunky. Actually, it's kind of akin to, like, Skyrim, the dwarven areas. Is it the dwarven areas that are all kind of steam? Anyways, whatever. And you find the troll's wife, and you have to set her free. And there's, like, this big ogre thing that's, like, defending it. And you break her out, and you get out, and then the two trolls are reunited, and it's actually quite a heartwarming moment. One of the few in this game. Right before this game takes a really dark turn.
Because that very next chapter is that night scene, which I ended up labeling on my notes as Nightmare.
It's the giant's castle. So what do you have on in your notes about Nightmare? I will be right back. Apparently my cat knocked the phone off of the receiver and it's beeping.
Where is it? Oh, yeah, I mean,
okay,
I have a lot of notes that I want to get into a little bit later when I start actually talking about my overall thoughts. But things like I was reminded of Video Game Dunkley, who had did a video apparently for Microsoft of this game, because he talked about it in one of his videos, and they played the one clip where, because there's that moment, and it's supposed to be this really serious moment where you see a whole bunch of people just hanging from the tree, and the Video Game Dunkley, it says something like, "Oh no, they played through this whole terrible game."
But anyways,
That's all I can think of.
You encounter this war between giants, and it's like the game goes from being like this pretty beautiful, whimsical world to just being this dark, gray, kind of horrific, violent war. And it's very interesting because you have these two brothers who are these very adorable little characters, and they take you from literally one moment to the next, from this beautiful, whimsical world to the darkest, freakiest second act of a game I think I've ever encountered comparatively to the first act. It's just like it's an adventure game. It's a fantasy adventure game, and I love that contrast. I think it's spectacular, and it sets the second tone of the game perfectly because it takes a little upswing a little later on. So how'd you feel about the tone shift?
I really actually want to take a moment to back up for just a second and explain my overall feelings about this game, because that will lead into what I really want this discussion to be about, which was I didn't like the game.
Okay.
I mean, it's a decent game. It's fine, but like I really didn't like it, and there's a lot of issues I have with it, and a lot of it seems to be stemming from what we might be disagreeing about on a lot of this. And because you had already said a few interesting things, like, despite the gibberish, you can really connect with the characters, and that there seemed to be this very discrete tone shift from the first act to the second act. And I'd argue both of those points.
They're adorable. They're kind of hard not to connect to.
I guess, but like, I mean,
okay.
Can we get to the ending at some point? Because
I
want to talk about it.
Can we skip all of the story stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just jump to the end, and then we'll rewind back up. So, ending. Shoot. Go ahead. What do you think? What happened? Let's just say what happens at the end first.
Okay, so very ending, you end up going through this limbo-esque fight with the giant spider, and the older brother, I don't know their names, I'm going to call them older and younger brother.
I wanted to hit the giant spider part first because that's actually an interesting character. Anyways, go
on. And he gets stabbed, like, right through the heart. And so the younger brother, tries to help him out, and they end up, like, right at the tree of, you called it the tree of life. I don't know, the tree of magical healing.
That's what it's said on. That's what it's said on Wikipedia. Go on.
Okay, and so he grabs some of the water from the tree and tries to save his brother, but he's too late. The brother's dead, and there's the whole scene of him burying his brother and then making it back to his father with the water, and yeah.
You're missing out on a lot of things though, because we skipped all the way to the end. We skipped the griffin, which is a character that you meet up with, and the other griffin. There's two griffins, as well as the fact that the giant spider that stabs his brother was actually like conning them the whole time, and like is a character who you save earlier on in the game. At the beginning of the third act of the game, you encounter a group of weird native people that are trying to sacrifice a girl, and you impersonate their god by covering yourself in blood. Again, pushing forward the dark tone of the latter half of this game.
I got that you're covering yourself in the giant's blood, because it's right after the giant section.
Yeah, well, there's like rivers of blood for that whole
and I also
part
figured
of the
out
game.
You don't actually need to cover yourself in blood, because the first time I played it, I didn't do that.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Because like
because part of it is you're supposed to pretend to be their god, which is a person standing on top of another person. And if you just do that, they will start to attack you, but they'll stop before they actually reach you.
Because if you cover yourself in blood, they won't even attack you.
Yeah.
Until you jump down, and then they come running at you and try to gut you. But anyways, so you actually save this female character who becomes very attached to the older brother as the game progresses. And then out of nowhere, essentially, she kind of turns into a giant spider and pulls a Sheila from Harry Potter. No, not Harry Potter. Lord of the Rings moment on you, and then tries to stab him to death. Anyways, go on back to the end.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to say is that with that ending, like it's this big emotional moment where the brother dies and all this stuff, but it just doesn't work for me. And I tried to pinpoint why. And I sort of broke it down to there were 3 things it could do, and even to some extent tried to do, but for me it just failed. Okay. And that was, this is supposed to be a loss of either narrative, mechanical, or you're supposed to feel it empathetically.
But it is all 3.
And that's the thing. I'd actually argue against all 3 of this. So, narrative real quick. So to be a narrative loss, you need to really understand the character that you've lost. You need to, feel like there's something really lost with that character's death. And I have to ask, what do we know about the older brother?
Okay.
Because there's not a lot. I mean, you can get like little snippets of personality. If you interact with different characters, you can compare the 2 brothers. The younger brother tends to be more whimsical, more free-going.
He kind of jumps around and waves his hands and is getting in trouble all the time.
Yeah, whereas the older one's a bit more serious, a bit more goal-oriented. And what's really weird is that actually switches at the very end, because you're talking about the spider that they sort of coerced him. I sort of ended up getting this impression that the older brother was basically falling in love with the spider lady, because there's a lot of moments where the younger brother, appears to be saying, like, look, we got to go back to our mission. We got to, do this, whatever. And the other brother's like, no, let me have this.
I'm just trying to, emphasize on how this game... Why did I go out of focus? I'm just trying to emphasize on how this game instills this sense of dread from a very early point in the game. Everything from the character that you encounter committing suicide. And what's interesting about that very early point in the game, when you run into that, the game makes you think that you can save him. And it was to the point where I actually reset a couple times thinking I could save him. It's not possible.
Guy that tries to hang himself?
Yeah. You can't save him.
You can save him.
No, you can't.
The one that's hanging kind of right next to the burnt house?
He just, jumps off the thing. It was...
Yeah.
You can't.
You use the older brother to hold him up so he's not choking. You use the younger brother to go up and untie the tree.
Really?
Tie the rope from the tree. Yeah.
Interesting.
There's a whole achievement tied to that.
Well, see, I didn't look at the achievements. I never look at achievements. But anyways, it instills, a sense of dread in you from very early on. And it completely messes with you and drags you down, okay? And by the time you get to the very end of the game, someone in chat here is pointing out the seal and the lady and the person hanging themselves that we were referring to. You make it through a number of trials with these characters, and they're adorable, they're cute, and you're controlling them, and it's hard to control them sometimes. You're fighting with the controls for this game, for the entire thing, okay? That, to me, connected me physically to the 2 characters. And then after you lose your brother at the very end, okay, you've been emotionally battled with these characters because you saved somebody and it was happy. You met a friend, and then you had to kill her because, well, she kind of turned into a giant freaky spider lady thing, which was terrifying. Yeah. And you've been through adventures with these characters for the past 3 hours, and then at the very end, they do something that Lewis didn't mention. When you're at the very, very, very end of the game, you have to swim. Now, the younger brother, can't swim. They make you use the older brother's controls to swim with the younger brother. And you'll just drown. You can just keep walking into that pond forever and you'll drown repeatedly. But
I don't think you
forces
actually
you to feel
drown.
A sense of
he
loss.
refuses to swim.
Same thing. But it forces you to feel a sense of loss because you feel something's wrong. Because, I don't know about you, but my hand was hurting by the end of playing this game. Just because
I could definitely understand that. There was a lot of that to get into. with sort of how the controls ended up not really playing well with the mechanics of how most of the game played out. But you're getting right into that thought of my second point, which was a mechanical loss. That if you lose a playable character, you should feel the gameplay change to account for that.
But it does.
So what happens when you lose the older brother, though? Well, first off, it becomes easier. You're not trying to control two characters at once. It's less of a mind bending, so it becomes a little bit easier that way. Now, the very beginning of the game, like the very first chapter, it sets up some asymmetric play. So it has things like the older brother is the only one that can pull the larger levers, and the younger brother, can get higher, but requires the older brother to hoist him up and stuff. So there's a couple of asymmetric gameplay like that. But then you look at the rest of the game, and the most of it's symmetric. I mean, both of them are making these incredible leaps when they're climbing on stuff, which was really weird to me. And a lot of it becomes very synchronized. They both have to make these jumps. They both have to do this or the other. And there's not a ton of asymmetric play. So when you lose that older brother, it's like, I didn't lose a lot of the abilities I already had because the younger brother was very similar mechanically. And yeah, they do come back to the beginning, that first chapter of the game basically, and force you to do those same activities that was asymmetric to kind of emphasize some growth of the younger brother. And I'll admit, that does work. It works really well. But what doesn't really work is the sense of, like, total loss. You don't really feel like that losing that character lost you the ability, some ability of the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm just kind of thinking back on the game going, the game needed gameplay, and if the entire thing was asymmetric, I don't know about you, but I found the asymmetric parts to be a little bit frustrating. So, I don't know.
I found it easier because it wasn't just like, oh, I got to make sure the two brothers aren't getting too far apart, because if you try to run them forward and you're slightly off and one starts running off a cliff or whatever, and I had enough issues with things getting stuck on things as it was. I mean, first time I played, like second chapter, the brother got stuck behind the younger brother got stuck behind a vine wall. And I played, the second time, and the older brother got stuck 10 feet in the air. And I had enough trouble controlling the thing. I didn't necessarily need, clipping issues on top of that.
You see, to me, I did feel a mechanical loss there. Because when the controls shift, right, at the end, like, I'm just going to keep pushing this point. When the controls shift at the end, that feeling of just, there's something missing here. Like, I don't have the older brother supporting me anymore. You know what I mean? Like, for most of the obstacles in the game, yes, okay, you're just kind of doing standard, like, traversal of the environments, right? For the majority of the game. Every major obstacle, whether it's the creek at the beginning, the giant winged plane thing, which we didn't even mention, because you made me skip through my synopsis of the story. The giant winged plane thing. You're like, let's just talk about the ending. Okay, fine. Whether it's giant winged plane thing.
Well, because I wanted to come back to that chapter, actually.
Chopping the arm of the giant off or anything. Every single major obstacle in the game from beginning to end requires each brother to do something different. And something was pointed out in the chat room real quick. In the end, I was saying, apparently I'm saying something wrong. He's trying to correct me that the controls don't switch. It just makes you swim, but without the support. To me, I'd swear to God, the controls just, like, swapped. But, anyways.
I mean, because I'll get back. I'll say one thing real quick, which was on the topic of gameplay, this felt really insubstantial in a lot of ways. It lacked. A lot of it is a puzzle game, right? You kind of come to these scenarios, and you have to figure out what combination of the brothers does whatever to get through. But the puzzles aren't very interesting. There's not a lot of thought that you have to, get through to do it.
Something that I need to mention here is from the very beginning of the game, they are kind of on and off, taking turns preparing you, making you feel the need to have both the brothers, and then, okay, you go off and you play through a bit of the game, and then, oh, nope, I need both of them now. And then, okay, they can split up for a bit, and we're just going to keep working through the areas, and then they get back together. That feeling of the necessity of having both of them in order to progress, whether you're using both of them to progress all the time, you need both of them to progress. And that, in and of itself, is preparing you for the eventual loss. And it's getting you used to having both of them for the eventual loss, which is going to happen at the end, where they take the older brother away from you, and then you're like, okay, now finish the game. You don't have as far to go because you had a trip back on a winged griffin, which is, quite honestly, the cutest griffin I've ever seen in my life. Something about this game, everything's adorable in it. But,
yeah.
The entire game is designed to make you get used to having two characters to control. Whether it's narratively or mechanically, you feel that loss. At the very end, when you are walking with the water from the Tree of Life back up to your father to give him that medicine to bring him back to life, heal him back from his sickness, the entire game is literally just a trick to make you feel attached to the other half of your controller. And when they change that and remap the controls to just the younger brother, it screws with your brain.
Maybe, but
I guess it messed with mine.
Maybe I'm too used to controlling a single character, because when it dropped the other character, it was like, okay, I feel like I understand this now. I don't know. I think that's a really interesting thing, and the discussion of whether or not the controls worked in the game is an important discussion in and of itself, because that actually, that question is kind of the root of whether or not the game worked.
So are we in a discussion right at this point, right now? Are we in a discussion of whether or not the game worked for you?
I don't know. I mean, I thought the idea here was that we're going to go off of each other and say, well, I didn't think this worked. Why didn't I think it worked? Why do you think it did?
Because I think that this is... I'm going to hit this from a different angle here, okay?
All right.
This is just a really, really, really interesting concept for a game in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
We have a game that was directed... I'm going to pop up his name here. And I'm probably going to butcher this. Joseph Fares. Fares? Is that how... I don't know. Anyways, he's a film director. Okay? He directs film. This was the first game he ever directed. And the sole purpose of this game was to make you feel something. And that is his quote. That's what he says about this game. And his whole idea was to approach game design from a point of view of making you feel a sense of loss. Okay? And he uses mechanics in a very interesting way to make you feel attached, connected, and a part of those two brothers. And yes, they don't speak in English, so you don't really know what they're saying, but they animate so crazily you get kind of attached to them. The game actually has incredibly good character development for a game that has no English or decipherable dialogue. And it's actually quite amazing what they've done with this incredibly interesting concept. What do you think?
That's interesting, because you had said I didn't hear that the director said that his purpose was to instill a sense of loss. And if that was his purpose, then for me at least, it didn't work. I didn't really feel that loss at the end. And I want to try to dissect that feeling. Why did it not work for me? And again, it's sort of a compound of a lot of weird things I felt about it, that I didn't connect to the characters. The controls kind of kept me separate from them in a lot of ways, since I couldn't meld my mind into it. If you're playing a game like a Mario game, oftentimes you just understand when you press, right, you move right. But when you have two controllers where you're moving two different characters and you have to constantly be like, okay, I want to move this brother over this way, so it's the younger brother, so I need to use this stick. It's like that kept me disconnected a lot. It didn't let me kind of connect with it. And then narratively, I never really felt like I understood the older brother. The younger brother, yes, I could understand that a lot more. He was basically allowed to emote a lot more. The older brother felt really stiff.
But the older brother does loosen up. When you encounter when you save the girl from the crazy whatever they were, the idol worshippers, I guess is what we'll call them. When you save the girl, okay, you slide down a hill, you get into a boat, you go down a river, some crazy shit happens along that point, and I'm swearing a lot. I'm gonna have to beep these out in post. You slide down the thing, and then you go along the river, right?
Yeah.
He loosens up. She loosens him up. Quite literally. She spends the next 30 minutes of the game hitting on him, and then turns into a giant spider and eats him. But
yeah, yeah. But I mentioned this a little bit earlier that at this point, it sort of switches. Actually, the older brother becomes, I wouldn't even say loosens up, more that he becomes careless, and then the younger brother kind of has to quickly grow up and try to force them kind of back, because there's a lot of those moments where where that younger brother is basically trying to kind of tell him, like, what are you doing? We need to get back on track. Or at least that's what I got from the dialogue. Probably you could have gotten a different interpretation if, you read the dialogue differently.
Yeah, well, I mean, this game literally communicates to you with sign language.
But if I were to say what worked for me in this game, okay, because, the director said he wanted to instill a sense of loss, that didn't work for me. So what did work for me? And I did want to mention this because, I said that I interrupted your synopsis. Yeah. Well, the chapter you were talking about, the one with the griffin, which is an incredibly long chapter, is actually by far my favorite and the only one that really stood out to me.
I love that sequence in the game.
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful.
And what happens in there? Well, first you kind of go through, and I think that's actually the one where the guy hangs himself, and you go through these, and you end up at a farm, and you hop on some goats, and you ride the goats up this mountain, and then you end up at this mad scientist, and you take his flying machine, and you fly it across this giant gorge.
He's
and you
literally Einstein. Like, he's got spiky hair and, like, big goggles.
Yeah. And then they, end up at this castle or whatever, and they're climbing all around the outside, and they end up inside, and they end up in a version of Jack and the Beanstalk, and they have to rescue the giant bird, and the bird flies the mountain, and the bird dies, and
it's more like it's an owl griffin, but it's okay.
A griffin, whatever it is.
It's an owl griffin. It has an owl head. Yeah. Can I say something?
Right ahead.
This is a note that I have over my thingy. This is the first time I've looked at my notes. You're tiny. Because there's giants everywhere. I think that with that whole sequence, with showing you giants, they're trying to make you feel like you are small and insignificant in a really big world.
Yeah.
And by doing that, giving you this huge war and that tower that you're climbing, which is also giant, it makes you feel insignificant.
Yeah.
Did you feel did you notice that at all? Or is that just me?
I wouldn't have said the word insignificant, but it definitely shifted the focus for me. Like, it wasn't about the two brothers. It was about this world and exploring this thing. I remember after playing it, I ended up watching Yahtzee's review of it, and he had said that it was like a really short, never-ending story.
Aww.
And
that gives me nostalgia.
And it's like, yeah, that seems about right. This sort of idea where you're in this giant world and you have to explore and see what's going on, this kind of mystical place. Because, yeah, you look at a lot of this other stuff, and a lot of it moves fairly quickly through these very different scenes, and that worked. If the game had focused more on that, I think it would have been better.
Because the art design in this game is amazing. Are you saying that you just wanted a longer game with more stuff to walk around in?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say longer. I would say actually faster, because a lot of this game felt like it was drawn out.
Really?
There's way too many mechanics that are just meant to slow you down. The wall sliding a bit, the wall slide thing, and uh, some other stuff like that, where it just and you have to hang on a chain and wait for it to move along a conveyor belt. There's a lot of waiting in this game.
Really? I think because there's a lot of timing puzzles, at least in that first sequence. With all when you're in the underground, there's a lot of timing based puzzles, but post that, not really.
I wouldn't even say that requires a ton of.
You got to remember,
timing.
you just said that the 3-hour game felt drawn out.
What?
How long did it take you? How long did it take you to beat this game?
Yeah, it's again like 3 hours or something. But again, the speed of a game is not how long it takes you to play it. It's how much content is in that amount of time.
Huh. So, because there is literally no point in the entire game where you are sitting doing nothing. You're always doing something, whether it's waiting for a conveyor belt to move, or jumping from a moving platform to moving platform, or jumping on a one moving platform, twisting a thingy, moving another platform over here. Like, you're always doing stuff, whether those platforms move slowly or not. There's never any literal point in the game where you're not doing anything except for the cutscene when your brother's getting stabbed.
Well, okay, and some of the other cutscenes where you're not doing
the other cutscenes. I don't know.
Though on the side note of cutscenes, I wanted to say one of the biggest issues I felt this game had was not telling you enough. Because I mean, that ending sequence where you're supposed to press the right trigger to summon your brother's ethereal spirit or something to swim across the water. I spent like 10 minutes there, unsure of what I was supposed to do because nothing in the game told me that was what I could do.
That is the point in the game when you're supposed to figure out that, hey, your brother's dead. You have to grow up and do it yourself.
Yeah,
that's
so
the
then
whole
why
point
do
of the
I
game.
Press the brother's trigger?
Because he's no longer there. You have to complete the task without his support.
Then why do I... Again, I mean, I can understand that.
That is the moment in the game. That moment in the game is the whole point of the entire game. Is to make you realize that your brother is gone.
Yeah, I understand that. And I'm not disagreeing with you there. That was really well done. It definitely showed a lot of growth for the younger character. But take a step back to the controls, right? So the younger brother used the one hand, the analog stick and the trigger to control all of his stuff. And so you have that younger brother there, and he needs to, get this sense of responsibility and do it himself. So you have to go to the trigger that the other brother had to press. It felt really awkward. It's like, well, if it's meant to be that this younger brother is doing it himself, why doesn't it just use that same controls? Why doesn't it just use the younger brother's controls?
Okay. When I played that sequence in the game, the very end of the game, this is literally the ending of the game. The last, 5 seconds of gameplay. You walk down to the river. The younger brother can't swim. You no longer have your older brother because he's dead. You walk up to the river, you walk into the water, and he shakes his hands and goes, no, 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 no. Shakes his hands and then goes, no, 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 no. I literally just started crying because I realized what I had to do. Like, I just cracked up. Like, I don't cry at movies. I don't cry at TV shows. I've never cried while reading a book. Actually, that's not true. There's one movie that made me cry, and that was The Lonely Bones, and that movie's terrifying. Don't watch that movie. It's horrible. It's a great movie, though. You walk up to...
And there's one game that made me cry, and it will be next week, so you get to complain how that game's not sad. So,
well, you mean next month. We do these monthly. Anyways, I walked up to the river, and I figured out what I had to do. And I literally started crying. Because the brother's not there anymore. He's gone. And I'm the only one left. And that's what the entire game is meant to make you feel. When I went on that rant a couple minutes ago talking about how this entire game is designed to make you feel that one moment. The realization of, hey, things are hard when you don't have someone to help you. Hey, things are hard when you don't have someone holding you. Things are hard when you don't have someone who has your back. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But at the same time, it feels like the controls
Did you
are
want
fighting against it.
did you want a quick time event? Like, what else would they do? If they did a quick time event, I would have thrown my controller across the room and said, "This game dumb," and walked out.
It's
1 star. Bad.
it's I don't know. Just do it just via the younger brother's side, where I don't know.
But then you would have just walked right into the water and been done. And you wouldn't have had the chance to realize that he had to the little brother himself, that character had to overcome that fear of the water and do it by himself because his older brother is no longer with him to help him.
But at the same time, you're making it like
you're skipping around
you're skipping around the crucial part of this moment, because you don't just walk up to the water and he says no. You walk up to the water and there's this lengthy cutscene where the mother appears again and he mourns over her loss, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. It really kind of fights against that whole
Do you think
discussion.
The ending was rushed?
The entire storyline of the mother just feels really empty. It's like there's a moment at the beginning where you sort of see the mother's ghost, and this sort of represents...
He watched his mother drown, that's why he's scared of water.
Yeah, and that's sort of their explanation for that mechanic. But, like, yeah, they showed mother had drowned, and the younger brother was there, and he's still grieving over the death, and then there's an LSD trip kind of in the middle where he's about his mom, and then at the very end, she appears again right before this moment we're talking about. But, like, what did that add to the game? What did those, like, 3 moments really do?
The whole purpose of the mother, from what I could tell, at least at the beginning, was just he's scared of water because he watched his mother drown. I don't know. Overall, what are your thoughts on the game? Did you like it?
I already said, not really.
Not really.
I mean, if the game looks great, it doesn't play very well. The puzzles are boring. It's kind of slow, and it doesn't really feel good, in the hand because of this dual character mechanic. And for me, the narrative just fell flat. It just did not work.
Because for me, the puzzles were simple and easy to get through. I just kind of walked through all of them. The only parts that were tricky were the figuring out the mechanics of why you needed to use, or the different places where you needed to use both brothers. I found the game very cinematic. It was like playing through a film. You took these 2 brothers and you went on a journey, and you come to the end and your journey concludes and you sit down and you cry in the corner for a bit because the ending is very sad. And I adore that game. I'm probably never going to play through it again, but I adore that game. And currently it's one of my favorite games ever made. So I guess we have to agree to disagree on this one. So any final thoughts?
Pretty much,
Liz?
yeah. There was actually one thing I wanted to say that I wanted to say towards the beginning, but that when I saw at the very beginning, it had the Unreal Engine logo. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, well, that seems kind of strange. Kind of after playing the game, I'd realized the game actually curbed 2 misconceptions I had about that engine. One, which was it couldn't do cartoonish graphics, and 2, which was it couldn't perform well on low-end PCs. And both of those, the game did fine for both of those. And so, I guess first impressions aren't always what you need to make of them. And I didn't like this game, and maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm cold-hearted, and I can't understand the loss of a life or something. Maybe I'm weird
I think
like
you just spent the entire game fighting with the controls.
Yeah.
Because if you have a hard time getting the hang of the controls, because it took me probably about 2 minutes, and I was fine with the entire game. I didn't have a problem with any of the puzzles. I just walked through the entire game pretty much. It was
for some
just
reason,
a breeze.
When I was playing the game, I kept always trying to control the younger brother with the left stick and the older brother with the right. So I kept trying to flip them. And if it had been the other way, maybe I would have struggled less. I don't know why.
I just controlled them. I don't know. I didn't have any problems with the controls throughout the entire game. That's unfortunate. I really wish that you could have enjoyed a thing that I enjoyed. But, we don't all like the same things, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about just kind of winding us down now. We're at 54 minutes. It's been a pretty good discussion so far. I think we've had a pretty solid episode of the podcast. I highly recommend this game to anybody. You guys should go try it. Lewis clearly doesn't, but you know.
I would still say play it once. I mean, if you have it in your Steam library and you just haven't played it, play it. It looks good, and the story may not have been for me, but it's there.
It's beautiful looking.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'd consider going back and just playing that one chapter over and over again. I could skip most of the rest, but that one chapter in the middle was great.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I think that concludes the second episode of the Story Mode podcast, everybody. We're not going to have a post-show today just because I really need to get to sleep. Thank you very much for watching. I highly recommend that you go back and watch our first episode where all three of us are here rather than just the two of us. And I hope that you guys all have a fantastic month. I will see you guys on Twitch on this channel. Lewis, what do you do? Anything you want to plug or talk about? Anything that you work on a daily basis?
I don't know. The only thing I work on a daily basis right now is OpenRCT2.
Give us a minute on that. What do you do on OpenRCT2?
Right now I'm actually largely working on getting it to work well on macOS. That's fun.
So you're the one person who cares about getting it to work on macOS. Excellent.
Pretty much.
Well, thank you very much for watching episode 2 of the Story Mode podcast, and I hope that you guys all have a fantastic evening, day, night, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. I don't know. I'm going to sleep. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.